You're locked into the afternoon agenda, and today we need to talk about extremism. There is a real pandemic out there. We have more terrorists living amongst us now than ever before. Today's papers are full of stories about an alleged case of radical extremism in this country. The killing of the MP Sir David Amess is being treated by police as a terrorist incident. On the issue of radicalisation as a whole, I fear that people have been locked in their bedrooms for a year and a half, watching goodness knows what online, becoming more and more disillusioned with the world. I, for one, am sick and tired of politicians and vast swathes of the media turning this focus onto our political discourse because of the way we're speaking to each other. I think that's absolute nonsense. I think it's a cop-out, and I think it ignores the real issue. There is a huge elephant charging around the House of Commons at the moment, and that elephant has the words radical Islam painted on the side of it. Radical Islam and the violence inflicted in its name, not just in this country, but around the world, is an issue. We appear to have politicians that are too slow or too unwilling to call it out. And we have a line of defence that even the French would regard as being pretty flimsy: the Prevent scheme. It's worth noting that the Prevent scheme is voluntary and it's not actually a criminal sanction. So once you're referred, you essentially have to volunteer to be de-radicalised. In some cases, about 11% of those referrals, the person is placed on what's called the government's channel scheme for support, such as mentoring. The most common referrals to channel were for far-right radicalisation, actually 43%, that may shock you, followed by Islamist radicalisation at 30%. Now, in the year to March 2020, that's when those figures were from. In fact, the head of MI5 warned recently that 10 of 29 attack plots disrupted in the last 4 years were actually linked to the far right. But if you speak to security experts, as I do most days, whilst far-right radicalisation is obviously a real and present danger, many will tell you that at present Islamist terror poses the biggest threat to life. Now, I don't want us to all have to overhaul the way we live our lives to compensate for extremists. People deserve to be able to walk the streets free from fear of attack. Some elements of radicalisation are almost impossible to stop, and we have to face facts on that. It's impossible to guard against an isolated individual, potentially in their nan's basement, who goes online, views something, and then decides to go on the rampage for whatever cause that may be. But there are areas where we're obviously not helping ourselves. Prisons are a breeding ground for radicalisation. You can go in a petty criminal and come out a mujahideen. People actually convicted of terror offences are often released after serving less than half of their sentence. We haven't got the resources to monitor them all, and in the case of the Streatham terror attack in February last year, even under nearly 24-hour surveillance, they can still go on a stabbing spree. It can happen just like that. As long as we keep hiding behind mental health problems and moderating our discourse, instead of calling out incidents like the Streatham attack for what they are, radical Islamist terrorism, then we won't solve the problem, will we? It's like rearranging the decking on the Titanic. Today, we really need to talk about extremism.